One, running a provincial park as a business does not work. Like education and healthcare, protection of nature is something that we have to fund through the public coffers, through the public purse. Two, selling private cottage lots doesn't add anything to a public provincial park. Those are the couple points I'm going to talk about in this Riverside rant. The Wilderness Committee began warning about park privatization in March as the pandemic struck and Premier Brian Pallister and his progressive conservative cronies rolled out legislation for park privatization. At the time, they vehemently declared that this is only about online provincial park passes. We know that that's not true now. 2 weeks ago, the Manitoba Liberals discovered a request for proposal. The government is trying to hire a consultant to, these are their words, monetize parks, divest park services, and find private investment for provincial parks. That's privatization. It's in writing. There's no way to deny it. This week, the NDP tabled a response they received to a Freedom of Information request. That's a FIPA in Manitoba law. Here's a February 3rd briefing note from with the park director's name. This has Rob Nedotiafko, his name on it, from February 3rd. And this is what it says. The strategy will also address government direction to achieve a system for the sale of leased provincial park cottage lots to cottagers. They're selling parts of our park. It's right here in writing. No matter how many times they deny it, it's right here. This week, the Manitoba Premier, the Conservation and Climate Minister, and the Parks Director have been misleading, dishonest, or outright lying to Manitobans about this, about their park plans and about their park strategy. I know this all sounds far-fetched, but I have put these documents such as this and all this explanation on the Wilderness Committee's website, and you'll find that the media has verified all this stuff as well. If you want to learn a little bit more and go, is this really what's happening? This is really what's happening to our parks. Okay, let's go into not the government's comments, but why is hiring a consultant bad? Really simply, the data that they need to know about these 76 provincial parks that they want to monetize and work on cost recovery, that data is in the desks, on the desks of the conservation staff and in the minds of the conservation staff who work these parks already. We don't need to hire somebody outside. We need to fund the conservation staff who know what they're doing, who know how parks should be expanded and serviced, and get them on board, not wasting $200,000 on a consultant. That's privatization of government, privatization of parks. Why no privatization of services? Really simply because we don't need people in parks only working for a profit and trying to cut corners. That's not why they're there. They need to look after nature, make sure that campsites are bear-proof. They need to ensure that things are taken care of properly. And there's so many varied ways that a park staff or a conservation staff work on protecting our provincial parks that we can't just say to a company, do all of these things and we'll give you a paycheck. That's not the way for a corporation to make profit. We are not supposed to be profiting off of our provincial parks. And Manitobans support this. They are outraged at the thought of privatizing parks. Going on to the selling of cottage lots in provincial parks. Why is this bad? Private cottage lots in provincial parks do not provide a public service. A public service is what provincial parks are. They're there for nature. They're there for us to have a place to go. That's all about, a provincial park is all about a public space for us. So we need to keep control of our parks so that we can make decisions about what happens in them, what things we're allowed to store in a provincial park lot. If it's a private cottage lot, it becomes different. We need to ensure that we make decisions based on biodiversity and nature. And those things will happen if we can retain control of provincial park lands. There's no way that we should be getting rid of provincial park lands. We need to be expanding parks. We need to be increasing protected areas. The reason for sale is because the park fees are very high for people who have a cottage lot in a provincial park. Well, that's kind of how it works. We don't have any density in provincial parks. The cottages are spread out, and the services they need, let's say waste collection, water and sewer, road clearing, fire response, all those services are spread out over a large area, and they're more expensive that way. And there's no way to get around that. If we create density, we've got more cottages, then we've created a town site and not a provincial park, and that's not what our provincial parks are for. So unfortunately, for the privileged few who have cottages in provincial parks, it's going to cost a little bit more to have your cottage lot. And this isn't just a Manitoba problem. There's other regions across the country, Algonquin Provincial Park, Rondo Provincial Park. They're looking at these areas. When I lived in Lake Louise, they looked at contracting because of they needed more nature. They wanted to get back to the national park area. The Banff National Park is famous for, Canada's first national park. So I'm going to just touch on what the director of parks said on the radio. He talked about a lot of bureaucratic speak. He talked about monetizing services, modernizing services, monetizing services too, and funding. But these are the critical words he didn't talk about. He didn't talk about nature. He didn't talk about wilderness, he didn't talk about climate, and he didn't talk about biodiversity. That's what a park is for. He's the director of parks. This should be first and foremost in his mind, but it's not. Okay, to finish here, I talked about this in the video 2 weeks ago, I think. We need a vision for parks, right? We don't want to respond just to Pallister's missteps and the misdirection we're getting. We need more park funding. We need more park staffing. We need more services like campgrounds and human-powered trails. We need more protected areas. Every single park is on the territory of a First Nation, and they need to be engaged in the direction for our provincial parks. So this is what I want you to take home. Talk to your family, push our elected officials with this. Make this public and known. By next summer, if this government hasn't already rolled out a plan for expanded park services, expanded park funding, increased staffing, and more natural destinations to keep Manitobans safe and outdoors during a pandemic, then Premier Brian Pallister and his progressive conservative government will have failed us in a monumental way, because we know this is coming next summer. They will have failed in the same way that they're failing us on the pandemic right now. I'm Eric on a Riverside Rant in Winnipeg for the Wilderness Committee.